showers. So it's a rainy day today, but at least in the northern part of California. And so hopefully all the rain will bring us some spring flowers. And so this little wreath will be perfect for that. So we're going to go through all of our supplies and everything you're going to need, and then we can get started. So firstly, we are using an embroidery hoop as the base of our wreath. And that's definitely an optional thing. You could use a cardboard circle if you wanted to cut out a circle instead. And you also don't have to use necessarily both pieces of the embroidery hoop. So embroidery hoops come in two hoops. So there's the inner hoop and the outer hoop that has this little lock mechanism on the top. You could definitely just use one or the other if you wanted to. And so you could make multiple wreaths, or you could use them together if you want it to be a thicker look. Totally up to you. So we're having our embroidery hoop for the base of our wreath. Like I said, you could definitely use like a circle cut out of cardboard, or you could use an actual wreath frame if you have one. You could make it out of a lot of other things if you don't have an embroidery hoop with you today. And then we're going to be making tons of flowers out of foam sheets. So of course, that means we need foam sheets. So I've got a ton of different colors here from our Creatology foam sheet packs. And I'm using a combination of the primary colors and the pastel pack. I just think it's kind of fun to have different variations of color. So you can kind of see this is like our standard primary yellow, and then this is a pastel yellow. So when you pair those together, it actually is kind of fun to have different shades. So I'm using a little bit of both from two different sets of the Creatology foam sheets, but you could use any colors that you want. And of course, you can make this out of paper as well, but some details will be different, just of course using different materials. But the foam sheets are so fun and easy to cut, and they stick together really well with both liquid glue or glue dots. And then we'll be using our printed out template to trace our flowers. Again, you don't have to use a template. If you don't want to, you could draw your own flowers. And so I'd recommend to have a pencil or a black marker. I'm using a black marker, especially so it's a little easier on camera to see, but a pencil shows up really well on foam sheets. And then to adhere all of that together and to actually assemble our wreath, we'll be using glue dots and some Creatology white craft glue. And to add some fun details, whether it's some fun little like leaves or vines, little centers of your flowers, we've got some of our fuzzy sticks here, little Chenille stems from Creatology. And you can use, again, any colors that you want. I pulled out a couple colors that I wanted for my color scheme that we're using for spring. But if you've got the big multi-pack of Chenille stems like I do, you can easily grab any colors you might need. And then some of our little Creatology pom-poms as well. I'm using just some of the smaller sizes. So I've got a few kind of pulled out here that this little like mini size is perfect for the center of some flowers. And then lastly, just a couple tools, some scissors, and oh, I already mentioned like a pencil or marker. And I think that's everything that we're going to be using today. So I'm going to switch my camera around so you guys can see my hands and we can get started. All right, so again, here's our little sample. You guys can see a couple little close-ups. We're going to go through all the steps here together of how to make your very own, including, of course, how to trace and make your own flowers, cut those out, do some fun centers like these little daffodil looking centers. We're going to make a little foam fringe and even add a little hanger at the top. So it's really easy to put on your front door or on the wall when you are all finished. Set that aside for now. And to begin, we're going to start with cutting out our template. Again, if you aren't using a template, you can start drawing flowers instead if you want to. So if you didn't want to print out a template or you wanted to make a different style flower, you can definitely get creative with this step. I like to sometimes use similar flowers, so you can see some repeating shapes in our sample here. We've got this shape here that's the same as this. We've got a small and a large that are similar shapes. This little daisy shape is repeated. And I think sometimes that gives you creates a nice composition when you're making something like this, but you can also make every flower different if you want to, or you can make your own flower patterns and you can repeat them as many times as you want. So as we get started cutting out our template, as Martina mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A and we'd be happy to come up with suggestions or give advice if you have any questions or issues with any of your materials. Or if you just want to let us know maybe what you are doing that's different, if you're using a different material or different colors at home. I always love to know what you guys are doing. All right, so again, if we're gonna cut out our template, I like to sometimes cut my piece away from the rest of my template paper. It just makes it a little bit easier to hold in your hand and your scissors aren't kind of fighting with all this extra paper. So I kind of cut it off first, and then I'm just gonna cut right along the black printed line. And as you cut, of course, you're using your hand holding the scissors, but you can also turn the paper with your other hand. So you can turn the paper in your scissors, and that helps cut rounded edges especially. So anytime you're doing any sort of craft, you don't only have to move around it, you can move it around you, and that sometimes helps work with tools in different ways. Of course, if you're doing things like watercolor or glitter, sometimes it's a little hard to move the craft and you need to move around it. But if you can move it, it can be really helpful. Our first little daisy. If you have a favorite flower, maybe you want to use that as an idea if you're drawing your own today. Kind of did a few different styles here. So this, of course, yeah, like a little standard daisy. This is just a cute little extra one. It's nice to have different sizes when you're doing this, so you can layer them up as well. So if you're drawing your own, play around with proportion and you can do different size flowers, whether they're all the same style or all different, but still have different sizes.
Lindsay says roses and peonies are her favorite.
Ooh, those are both great choices. I love both of those as well, especially at peonies. They're so cool with all their fun layers. Go back into any of your templates as you cut them out too. Like I feel like I have a kind of a rough edge here, so I'm just gonna cut it down a little bit to get a nice smooth edge. Especially it's easier to do that with your template. That way you know that you're happy with that shape before you start tracing it. And then you have to edit every one that you trace. And templates also are like a tool. So you don't have to worry about if you get color or paint or marker on them. They're not going to be part of your finished craft. And they can also be saved. So even if you make this wreath today using these templates, you can reuse the same one. So I keep a lot of mine, and they're small, just little paper templates. You can put them all like in a little baggie or a drawer with all your other supplies. And then every time you need something, you can be like, oh, I want to make a spring card or a Mother's Day card or something different. You could pull out some of these flowers if you liked a certain shape, and you could just use that again and again. All right, so there we've got all of our different little flower shapes ready to go. And we're going to start tracing these next. So to do that, we can pick any color that you might want and mix and match all sorts of colors and shades. As you can see, again, I got all sorts of different colors here. I'm going to start with some of my pastel yellow. And I'm going to take my first template, lay it on top of my foam. And I do like to try to get starting, excuse me, starting in a corner or along the edge, so you have less waste. So I try to get it all the way close to the edge. And then I'm going to hold it down with one hand and then take my marker or my pencil and just drag that around the edge to trace it. Again, I'm using a black marker, so it's a little bit easier. You guys can start to see that, but you can use a pencil, even a colored pencil will work. There's our first flower. I'm going to trace a couple different styles on the same color before switching to our next color. And for our wreath today, as you saw in the sample, not the entire embroidery hoop is covered in flowers. And so you can see only a little, about half of it is, and this is in like an asymmetrical style. So you can do as many as you want. You don't have to do this asymmetrical style if you don't want to. You could do cover the whole thing in flowers, or only do a few flowers even if you wanted to. And you can kind of mix and match all different styles to play with your wreath. So because I'm only using like filling up half of my wreath, you don't need to have a ton of flowers, but we will definitely want a few different styles and colors and sizes so we can layer them together. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. We're going to trace all of them and then we'll cut them all out. I'm going to switch to some pink. I'm going to do like a big pink flower. And so just continue tracing a few flowers. I would say you probably want at least 8 to 10 to have a good presence on your wreath. It also depends on what size wreath you're making. So we're using like a 10-inch embroidery hoop, but you can use a larger or smaller one. You could make little mini wreaths that could hang from a doorknob instead. That would be really cute. Or in the window. So you can make this in a lot of different styles. So depending on how big your wreath hoop is, whatever form you're using, will depend on how many flowers you want. But yeah, I would say to start plan around 10, and then you can always add, or if you have a couple left over, you can make a card or put one on the fridge or paste into the wall. So I can layer some of these colors. Let's see, in our sample wreath, of course, we used a lot of pink and yellow and blue. Should we do more blue together today, or should we do a purple? Or we've got this fun orange shade. You have a preference, or if you're using a color at home, can let me know. Definitely going to use some white here, adding the white flowers. I'm going to do all in these little tiny extra flowers. I need to add a nice little pop of contrast to put a neutral color in there, like a white or a tan would be cute even. Probably good. I have 3 little white flowers. We'll do a little bit of this purple in here too. Let's see how many flowers have we traced so far. We've got 2 purple. We've got our 3 little white ones. For our bigger ones, we've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to start with that. We can always trace more flowers, of course, or draw more if you want to. So I'm going to start by cutting these away from the rest of my foam. And so that way you have this whole extra piece that you can use for more crafts. And we're just going to cut along the line we just drew or traced, just like we did to cut out the template. And if you're using a pencil or a colored pencil to trace these, probably either erase the little bits of line that's left or it's not as noticeable. But if you used a marker, you can cut kind of right on the inside of the line, or you can always flip it over, and then all of the remnants of anything you traced will disappear, and it will be on the back and you won't see it. Especially if you're hanging your wreath on a door or on the wall, you won't see the back of it. Here's another one of our flowers, a cute little daisy. As I'm cutting out this one, it's sort of more squared. You can see I'm just kind of going straight and then turning my foam a little bit as I go to get those little rounded edges. But you can also do a totally little straight edge if you want to and have sharp lines instead of rounded lines. So flower pile is growing. And like I said at the beginning, you can do this out of all different materials, of course. So even though I'm using foam today, which I really enjoy crafting with the craft foam sheets or any of the little foam pieces that Creatology makes, there's something that I like about the texture of cutting through the foam. And like I said, they're really easy to kind of manipulate into a lot of different ways. So it's similar to the way you can do so many different crafts and shapes and things with paper, but then it gives you a three-dimensional aspect. So it kind of makes everything you craft with a little bit thicker. You can kind of play with different dimensions of things, which is fun. So even to mix and match foam with paper, and so that everything isn't just flat. And today, most of what we're cutting is all just the foam. We'll cut through some of our Chenille stems as well, but which the foam's pretty easy to cut. But just a general tool, trying to get as much of your material into the mouth of your scissors. So I was like, this is the mouth when you open it up. You've got your two different blades here. So the closer you get your material into the center, close to your hand, holding the handle, will give you more control. So as you start to cut, I'm going to pull it in all the way as far as I can open my scissors and then cut down. That helps you get a full length of the blade as you cut, as well as more control and more pressure. So especially when you're cutting through things that are harder to cut, maybe like cardboard, or even sometimes the Chenille stems, all these little guys that we'll be using that have wire in the center, putting a little bit more force on it, which is coming from your hand holding the handle, will help cut through harder material as well. Big flower here to cut out, and then we'll cut out those little tiny white flowers. There, we're almost done with the cutting portion. Hopefully your hand is not hurting yet. And again, you might be making different flowers at home or different size flowers. If you make them really big, you don't need as many. If you make them really tiny, then you're going to be cutting for a bit, but also I think that could be really cute. All right, and there you have all of our little flower pile here getting ready to go. We can start to assemble some of these, but I think before we do, we should get all of our pieces kind of ready. So what I like to do is almost like prep all of this. So we've got all of our flowers sort of ready to go. We'll cut out some of our little shapes. I'll show you how to make those and do our little daffodil fringy centers here. And then we'll have all these fun pieces to kind of mix and match as you go. And that way you know all your options. So sometimes I like to do that. So that's what we're going to do to start before we assemble. So what I'm going to do is cut a long strip down the shortest side. So here's your foam sheet. We've got our long side, goes all the way across, and then we've got the shorter side. I'm going to cut a strip a little less than an inch, maybe half an inch, all the way down. And I'm not too worried about it being perfectly straight. We're going to cut this into a little fringe by holding our strip and then taking our scissors and cutting little teeny lines into it without cutting all the way down. If you cut all the way down, you're going to cut through it and it will cut your little fringe off from the rest of your strip. And we're going to roll this up once it's all fringy, and that will be our little daffodil centers. They don't have to be all perfectly the same. Some are a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner. You can see all these little fringes. And we're going to just slowly go down, cutting lots of little lines all the way down this little strip that you just cut. And when we roll these together, we can probably get a couple of centers out of each strip. So you might not need the whole strip to fill one flower center. But I like to do all the fringe together first. Then you kind of roll it up and see how big of a center you want it to be before you trim it. And you might be able to get a couple of centers out of one strip, or you can just cut another strip and do as many fringe centers as you want to. And if you do cut through your fringe all the way on accident, you can of course cut another strip of foam or hang on to those pieces. If you've cut through them and you have multiple small pieces, we can probably layer them together as we roll them by using glue dots. And so it won't be a total waste. If you have little tiny pieces, that might be a little more challenging, but if you have a couple of inches of fringe, we can layer them together and still make a center. That way you're not wasting your supplies or your time. Get to the end, so there's not much left to hold on to. You can always hold on to the other side and just do little snips at the end here. So I've got this little strip now of all my little fringe. And we can roll this by using a glue dot. So I've got my little glue dots here. I've got a couple different sizes. This one's like the little teeny mini glue dot, looks like that. And this one's a little bit larger. I like to kind of have both options on hand, but any size will really work. And if you are new to the world of glue dots, welcome. You will love them. But they've got these tiny little clear dots that are hard to see on camera. But there's like, it looks like a little bit of glue, basically almost dried glue, but it's sticky. And so you can put a little glue dot, and we're going to fold it onto itself, and then we'll roll it. I'm kind of just trying to keep my base flat. Again, you don't have to use all of it. As you can see, as I've started to roll this, creates this fun little center that looks sort of like a little daffodil, or all those little like pollen stems coming out of the middle of a flower, and kind of bend all of your pieces. But you can decide how big you want it to be. So I'm using only about half of this so far, and I think that that feels like a good size for a center of a flower. I'm going to take another glue dot. I'm just holding this right now. If I let go, it will all unravel. And if it does, it's easy just to roll it back up. Take another glue dot and stick my glue dot right there, and then press it against where I just rolled. And I'm just going to trim off the rest of this. Again, you can kind of play with the center, smush it down a little bit to fold all of your little fringe. So you have a cute little center already. That's going to be so adorable. So we're going to do the same thing. Again, I'm collecting all of our pieces, and then we'll assemble everything. I'm going to take another glue dot. I like to start with one on the inside here. You don't necessarily need this first one. The last one's going to be your most important glue dot, but I like to kind of just give a little start to it, that you know that it's going to be a nice fold to start with, and that will hold it in place. And then you can start rolling it. And looking at the bottom here, trying to keep a nice straight line on the bottom, so that when we glue this to your flower, it has a bigger surface. If this is all different sizes and this is wrapped around like this instead, you're gonna make it really hard to find a surface for your glue to stick to. So wrapping this around and around and rolling it and keeping this surface pretty flat, that gives a lot of surface for a glue dot or your liquid glue to stick to, versus just a little teeny edge. So that will help. Another glue dot, stick that right onto the edge, and then fold that down. Give it a little bit of pressure. Anytime you're using any glue, whether it's tape or glue dots or liquid glue, hot glue, it all likes pressure. So anytime you add a little bit, give it a little squeeze, make sure to push down on it. Have another cute little center. All right. Let's also make some of our chenille stem leaves. So to do that, we're going to bend these. And if you aren't familiar with our Creatology chenille stems, they are super bendy. So you can bend them into a billion different ways by just pressing them and folding them to do a little zigzag. You can wrap them around a pencil, which we will for some coils. You can hold it on with one hand and then wrap it around a pencil or a marker or crayon. You can even wrap it around your finger. And then pull that off. I'm going to cut off this end where I was kind of just playing with the zigzag. You could use zigzags if you want to, but I kind of like this little coil look to be almost like a little bit of ivy growing, little vine. And then just pull both ends, stretch it out a little bit. However, if you want to do a leaf shape what we're going to do is basically start with like a little oval or a little circle. I'm going to cross one end over the rest of the chenille stem and wrap it around it. And go under and over to wrap it around. And I'm going to cut off that extra. And now this, even though this is a point, I'm going to hide this within the wreath because I don't think that that's quite as cute to look at. So I'm going to bend this by making the bottom of this wider and then pinching this portion into a little point. Look, already you can see a little leaf shape starting. So I'm going to hold on to my little point and then just kind of press it around until I like the leaf shape. You want to have a pointed portion and then a rounded kind of oval portion. And there's a little leaf. This little piece here that's smaller, we can do the same thing. So I'm going to overlap my two ends and wrap that around and around. And then again, this is going to be the part that we're going to hide. So I'm going to kind of widen that and then stretch this toward the top and give that a little squeeze. You can kind of squeeze the top, and as you're squeezing the point, kind of push down. You can see that little like spring in the wire. And there's another little leaf. Look how cute those are together. We can layer these up. And do a couple more of those. Again, we're gonna just bend this into a little circle shape. And like I mentioned before, getting the chenille stem far into the mouth of your scissors as possible before you cut it will give you more pressure and make it easier to cut through the wire. A few little leaves here. Maybe we'll do another one. And I'm just using one style leaf. Of course, you can bend these into a ton of different patterns if you want to. I kind of like the simplicity of just like a classic little leaf. All right, let's do another little coil maybe. You can also add different coils. I have all different colors here, of course, so you could do different colors if you wanted to. They don't have to just be green leaves. You could do all different ones. So again, if we're going to do another little coil, then I'm going to hold this onto my pencil with one hand and then wrap it around and around. You can just do a portion of it, or like this. I'm just going to do the whole thing and then slide this off. We can stretch this all out, and then you can cut this down into smaller pieces. Maybe you want to just have a couple little pieces. We can cut this down into 3 small little pieces of vine or ivy. So now we are about ready to assemble all of our fun little pieces, and we're going to assemble them as we build our wreath. So I'm going to take all of my pieces here. We've got our wreath itself, and then we've got our flower cutouts, of course. Got all of those. We've got some of these little fun fringy centers. We've got leaves. We've got cute little viney coils. And then we have some more of our little pom-poms here. So all these pieces, what we're going to use now to build our actual wreath. And we can use our glue dots as the primary glue. You can use liquid glue to glue all of this onto your wreath even. It will take longer to dry, but I do like using liquid glue sometimes when I do like sandwiching these things together. So I'm going to use a combination of the two different glues. But then when it comes to things like the chenille stems and the pom-poms, using glue dots are going to be your best friend because they don't really stick very well with liquid glue. So to start, we've got our little wreath here ready to go. And you can lay some of these out if you want to. You can start gluing immediately. But sometimes I like to just lay out a couple to get an idea of where I want some color to be. And do I want these exact same shapes next to each other? I like to kind of vary the shape all the way around. So these two purple and light yellow, I'm going to move this lighter yellow up. So I know that I have this space to fill. I'm liking some of the things that are happening, but maybe there's too purple next to each other. I can kind of switch these. And just kind of play around with what you like as you start to build these all together. And then kind of take them apart again as you assemble it. But get an idea of what you're going for. So it's looking really fun. We've got nice color variations. So we've got pinks and purples, but they're not all right next to each other. We've layered some of our colors here, and then we'll add more details as we go. So to start, I just like to take out one. I'm going to put a glue dot in the center of it. And they might not all go directly in the center depending on where they're going to hit your little wood frame. You can also put the glue dot directly on the frame. And then I'm just going to lay, kind of holding down the other pieces of where I like them, and then lay that down and press down, sticking it to the frame. So again, as I'm going down, I'm just kind of taking out one at a time, then adding in a glue dot. And then put this on top, overlapping. My next little purple one here. And for this one, I'm going to take these off together. And here's where you could use a little liquid glue if you want to, or you can just stick with more glue dots. It's up to you. And then here I'm going to take a glue dot, stick that onto the wood frame. Sometimes they like to stick to your fingers. And then as I put this in, I want some of this purple flower to actually overlap. So I'm going to lift it up a little bit as I nestle that in. And then you can always stick a glue dot to the flower in front of it. So that it holds on to it and kind of lays it flat. And I'm continuing to build our little wreath here. And as you can see, it's already looking so cute. So you can add as many details as you want. I think that it's fun to add some detail, but also if you are liking a more simplified wreath, maybe you don't want to do a lot more, you don't have to. It's totally up to you. Or you can do a lot more than what we've prepped. We're going to keep adding things, of course, together, but you could always take markers or paint. You could add cute, different little detail work to all of your flowers. You could add glitter or rhinestones or beads. The fun never has to stop. So let's see, let's keep adding some stuff. I still have this little pink flower here. Let's get that guy in there too. And so again, I'm leaving this portion of my wood wreath frame. That's going to stay just empty and just be the wood. But you can keep going. If you want to add flowers all the way around, you can do that, and that would be really, really cute. Or you can do an asymmetrical look like I am, where only a portion of it. So instead of having it be symmetrical so that both sides look the same, mine's asymmetrical. So this portion has all of the detail and the bulk, and this is really empty. I'm going to dot in these smaller little white flowers that I think add a little bit of brightness. Again, I think anytime you can add a little neutral, and you can use any sort of neutral, whether you want to use a tan, white, black. Black could be really fun. You could do make it a little bit funkier. Maybe it's a little bit edgier spring than the white. So you can get a lot of contrast. But I think anytime you add in a neutral, that's kind of nice. So I'm just kind of seeing where I need it. And I feel like I just need a little bit right in this general middle area. So even though a little bit is only popping out, just adds that fun little color. Now we can add in some of our little leaves. I'm just continuing with our glue dots here. Sticking a glue dot down toward this bottom area, sort of the stem of the leaf of where we wrap them together. And then I'm going to take this and kind of tuck it on the back side. And just let that peek out. Do a little. You can also flip this over if you want to see where you're sticking them. And then because these are wire still, you can kind of bend it wherever you want it to, which direction you want it to face. Looking cute already. You can flip this over. I'm going to lay that down there and do another little leaf with it and playing with different sizes so they're not all the same size right next to each other. You can add a couple more of these little coils. Kind of like them nestled with the leaves, so it feels like they're like growing from the leaf or the vine. But you can kind of dot them wherever you want to. Okay, let's add some flower centers next. So this you could definitely do glue or a glue dot also. And take this little center, I'm going to put it right in the center of my flower, and then just again pushing down, giving it a little pressure. And again, gives you such a fun three-dimensional look. As you can see, that's sticking out. Everything else is a little bit flatter, and then that's sticking out, giving you some dimension. These little vine curly cues are sticking out. Add another one. And not every flower needs a center either. I think some of them are cute just by themselves. But let's add in some pom-pom centers too. You can do pink or green or tan. Got all different colors here. I'm taking my little mini one. And again, I'm sticking a glue dot on it. And if the glue dots are too big, you can always kind of fold them down onto themselves. I can take that little glue dot and stick it onto the center. You can see as I'm kind of adding these in, I'm just lifting up different little flower petals to get in another little center. Look how cute your little spring wreath is. The last step that you need to do is to add a little hanger at the top, and we're going to use another one of our little Chenille stems to do that. And again, any color that you might want. So we're going to go through this little center portion of the lock mechanism on your embroidery hoop. If you are just using the wooden ring portion and not this, you can just wrap it around the wood instead. So I'm going to go through this and kind of go in half. And I'm going to twist these together at the top just to make sure that it holds it in place. And then we're going to do the same thing at the top by overlapping these two ends. Overlap them and then twist them together. And then if you want to trim off if it's uneven or trim it off a little bit. And there you have a little hanger that's so easy. You can hang this directly onto any little hook or wherever you might want to put it. And you're all set and ready for spring. So I hope you guys had a ton of fun crafting. I definitely did. And I'm sure your spring wreaths look beautiful. So thanks so much for crafting with me and Michael's, and we'll see you soon. Bye.